Welcome back. A killer gunned down 26 innocents in Sutherland Springs, Texas on Sunday. But gun rights advocates say there would have been likely even more carnage if a citizen hadn't confronted the killer with his own gun. The left, well, they're having a different reaction, of course. This is a great social scientist.
Coming into it every day and was eating people. You wouldn't do nothing. You would move the village, you would build a fence, or you would kill the tiger. Liberty is tigers.
At least Stephen Colbert is for fences. Joining us now for reaction in Idaho is Mark Furman, former LAPD detective, Fox News contributor, and with me in Washington, Igor Volsky. He's a director of Guns Down. It's a group that wants to dramatically reduce the number of guns in the United States. Igor, we won't do the whole interview in Russian. We were talking.
We can.
Давайте говорить. All right, let's talk about what happened. That is a domestic abuser, child abuser, escaped from a mental facility. That should never have happened. It's against federal law. There was a mistake done at the Air Force level. We don't know who, but something happened. We have a lot of people dead. What is your reaction to the fact that this was not properly entered into the database?
Well, that's a problem, and that needs to be addressed. But we also need to address stopped by the database. You could have gone online and purchased a semi-automatic weapon, purchased a high-capacity magazine that allowed him to gun down all those people. That's why those things should be banned.
Mark, can you go online if you're a guy who 9mm, no problem?
No, if you're prohibited through purchase at a gun store, you're prohibited by any gun sales on the internet or in many gun shows. I mean, there are states where you could purchase a weapon at a gun show, but this probably wouldn't be what occurred in this instance.
Stephen Williford, Igor was able to hunt this guy down, get in a car with the killer for 11 miles, I guess in a truck, and they raced behind him. He did shoot him. Don't know how bad the injury was. The guy ultimately drove into a ditch, self-inflicted gunshot wound. If he hadn't chased him with a gun, shot him with a gun, he may in fact have engaged police or killed others. Do you
Well, I think we're all thankful that this guy intervened. Absolutely.
With a gun, right? He didn't intervene with a powder puff. He had a gun.
Well,
yes. Throw marbles at him?
Well, in this instance, you're right. But if you look at, for instance, what happened in Colorado last week, where there was a shooting at a Walmart store, people pulled out their guns, and it created intense chaos for police. I mean, again, we have 300 million guns in America.
So what do you want to do about that?
If guns really kept us safer, get rid of the assault weapons that this guy used, get rid of the high-capacity magazines that allow them to spray these bullets. That's a good start. And then let's have a conversation about how we move this country towards fewer guns, where guns are harder to get, when you need an actual license and training to have a gun. That's what's going to keep us safer. That's what a lot of other countries have done. It's why they have,
anyone has a weapon.
We're in this
should know how to use it, should know safety. Mark, you spoke about this today with me earlier on radio, that individuals who carry weapons concealed, it's kind of, cool, carry a weapon concealed, but if you don't know how to use that weapon, correct? He knew what he was doing with an AR-15. That it can be very accurate if you know how to use it, and it helped save more lives.
Well, you're right, Laura, and he had the presence of mind, and he actually, through his training in the NRA, being an instructor, he actually understood and assessed the situation, and then he took appropriate action with controlled fire. If you listen to what he said, he probably didn't even realize what he was actually describing, but he was describing not only well with it, and anybody that carries a weapon would probably invite the training and really enjoy the training. But here's the downside of gun control. Criminals, gang members do not purchase guns legally, and if you get rid of legally purchased guns, those weapons are still in the hands that are committing the lion's share of homicides in this country.
Eager?
Well, criminals may also not follow speed limits, yet we have speed limits. We have seatbelt laws that
It's
But we don't have
irrelevant.
a
That's an
constitutional
irrelevant
amendment regarding speeding.
Well,
That's the problem.
Justice Scalia said it best. There are reasonable regulations and restrictions on guns. Almost every single gun restriction has stood up to the. We are really the smartest nation in the world. Again, these weapons, these high-capacity magazines, these assault weapons are a big problem. They're used in every single mass shooting, Laura. The one we saw in Vegas, the one we're seeing now. I mean, I'm sure we can come to an agreement here that you shouldn't be able to have an assault weapon, stack it up with rounds of bullets, and just shoot at people,
well,
right?
First of all, that's a crime. That's a federal crime. So no, you can't do it across the country who are buying fentanyl on the black market. I think Mark's point is, and I know you're very well intentioned on this, you want a good outcome, but I think Mark's point is, if you're criminally minded, you will commit carnage. Carnage is on your mind. You're going to do it. You're going to do it with a gun you get illegally. You're going to do a Tsarnaev Brothers deal with a pressure cooker. Get something to do.
Yeah.
So I would say on your point, high-capacity magazines, I guess people could ban those and see how that goes. But in the end, we're dealing with depravity, evil aspect to this that is real.
Oh, I agree with you. That's certainly a piece of it. But again, we have to make sure that those people don't have the easy access to guns they have today.
Yeah, and Mark, the fact that the Air Force still has not released the results of what has to be a fairly simple investigation. I mean, with all the computer capacity we have, putting people on these gun registry, the bureaucracy, you can cut through it to find out whose responsibility it was to enter this information into this database about this freak, mentally unstable freak, who was able to commit this horrific carnage. And I want to know, are there other people whose names weren't entered onto this database? Other spousal abuse convicts, other people who escaped from mental institutions? Would they forget to enter them on the list too? We should know about that.
Responsibility with the stack of reports to enter it, and they either forgot, they dismissed it and just ignored it, forgot about it.
We need to know.
It doesn't really matter why. They know that, I mean, the law is absolute, and the Air Force is admitting it should have been done. So it's one of these things that occurred, but it didn't, and it wouldn't have stopped this shooting. This man had a mental defect. This man was a wife beater, a child beater, a dog abuser. This guy was going to get a weapon, and he was going to take out his revenge. And it doesn't really matter if he bought a gun at the local, gun store or he didn't. And as far as the idea that criminals are going to be somehow alerted, well, I guess we just can't buy this gun because they're illegal. The only people that 162 people were murdered last year. That is the weapon of choice now, assault rifles, none of which were obtained legally. Not one.
Well, how often do you hear about machine guns being used in these shootings? You don't. You know why? Because they're very, very heavily regulated under current law, back to a 1934 law. So here we have a
they're regulated, but they're out there.
If you regulate and restrict weapons and you ensure that they're really not in circulation, that means the people with the mental conditions that we're talking about who shouldn't have guns simply can't have access to them. That's why I'm saying
they still kill.
It's not enough to just do background checks. You got to go after the guns themselves.
Right? Do you think so? Do you think people are just going to turn them in, and how does that work? I mean, the government confiscates. I mean, how practically does this work?
Well, look, I mean, there's a bill right now, HR 4052, that would ban these high-capacity magazines that we've been talking about. Dianne Feinstein, for years, has been talking about reintroducing the assault weapon ban. By the way, if that had still been in place, this guy would not have been able to get this kind of weapon, and all of the shootings that we've been hearing about recently also would not have happened, or at least would not have happened with that weapon.
Mark,
that again,
Mark, you can close it out.
Well, 100 million guns, that means you've probably got about 5 or 6 or 700 million magazines. So possession of a magazine really wouldn't be a crime.
3D printing, I have to say.
But
yeah, you can 3D print a magazine, by the way, now, so that's also out there. Both of you, provocative conversation. Thank you so much. And still ahead, fresh off his speech in South Korea, President Trump heading to Beijing. Will he stand up to the Chinese president or back down on